As she caught her arrow midair, the morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of the Kithran settlement, as Maya drew back her bowstring for what she believed would be the final time. The carbon fiber composite bow felt familiar in her hands after 3 years of relentless practice under the watchful eyes of her alien instructors. Around her, the crystalline structures of the Kithran city hummed with energy, while their graceful forms moved through their daily routines with an efficiency that still amazed her. Maya had been part of the first human diplomatic mission to establish contact with the Kithran Empire. What began as a hopeful exchange had turned into something far more complex, when cultural misunderstandings led to the humans being classified as potential threats. Kithrans, with their advanced technology and rigid social structures, had offered the humans a choice: prove their worth through their trials or be expelled from Kithran space forever. The trial Maya faced was one of precision archery. The Kithrans valued accuracy above all else in their warriors, and had designed a test that pushed even their own people to their limits. She had to hit a target no larger than a dinner plate from a distance of 300 meters while standing on a platform that shifted and moved unpredictably. It was a test that combined physical skill with mental discipline, and very few beings had ever passed it on their first attempt. Maya had trained for this moment every day since arriving on the Kithran homeworld. Her human physiology gave her certain advantages the Kithrans had not expected. Her binocular vision was sharper than theirs, and her ability to track moving objects was superior. But the Kithrans possessed natural stability and patience that Maya had to work twice as hard to match. The testing ground was a vast amphitheater carved from living crystal that amplified sound and light in ways that could be disorienting to newcomers. Hundreds of Kithrans had gathered to witness the trial, including members of the ruling council, who would decide the fate of the human mission based on her performance. Their tall, elongated forms stood perfectly still as they observed with large, multifaceted eyes that missed nothing. Maya stepped onto the platform and felt it immediately begin to sway. The Kithran technology was remarkable in its subtlety. Platform did not move in predictable patterns, but responded to her weight shifts and breathing in ways designed to throw off her balance. She had learned to work with it rather than against it, finding a rhythm that allowed her to maintain her aim even as the world moved beneath her feet. She raised her bow and drew the string back to her anchor point. The target seemed impossibly small at this distance, a white circle against the darker crystal wall that surrounded it. The arrow she had selected was one of her finest, crafted with human precision engineering and Kithran materials that made it both incredibly light and devastatingly accurate. The wind that flowed through the amphitheater was another variable she had learned to read. It moved in currents that followed the crystal formations, and she had spent countless hours studying how it affected arrow flight. Today, the air was relatively still, but she could sense the subtle shifts that would influence her shot. Maya controlled her breathing as she had been taught. In through the nose, hold for 3 seconds, out through the mouth. Her heart rate slowed, and her vision sharpened until the entire world seemed to contract to just her, the bow, and the target. The sounds of the watching crowd faded to nothing, and even the movement of the platform seemed to slow. She released the arrow with a smooth, fluid motion that was the result of thousands of hours of practice. The projectile flew true, cutting through the air with barely a whisper of sound. For a moment it seemed as though time itself had stopped, as every eye in the amphitheater tracked the arrow's flight toward its target. But then something extraordinary happened. A figure appeared at the edge of the platform, moving with impossible speed. Maya had been so focused on her shot that she had not noticed the newcomer until he was already in motion. The figure was tall and lean with the characteristic blute, hinted skin of the Kithran nobility, but there was something different about him. His movements were too fluid, too precise, and carried a confidence that spoke of incredible skill. The arrow was still in flight when the figure reached out with one hand and plucked it from the air as casually as someone might catch a ball. The projectile that had been traveling at over 200 feet per second simply stopped in his grasp, as if it had been moving no faster than a gentle breeze. The amphitheater erupted in shocked silence. Maya stared in disbelief at the figure who now held her arrow as if it weighed nothing. She had put everything into that shot, and it had been perfect. The trajectory, the timing, the release had all been flawless. Yet this stranger had intercepted it with an ease that defied comprehension. The figure turned toward her, and Maya saw that he was indeed Kithrin, but unlike any she had encountered before. His features were sharper, more defined, and his eyes held an intelligence that seemed to pierce right through her. When he spoke, his voice carried across the amphitheater without effort, despite the fact that he seemed to be speaking in a normal tone. "I am Tor of the 4th house of the Kithrin Council," he said, holding up the arrow so everyone could see it. "And by the sacred traditions of our people, I have caught this arrow in flight. The one who loosed it is bound to me by law and custom until such time as the debt is repaid." Maya felt the world tilt around her. She had studied Kithrin customs extensively during her time here, but this was something she had never encountered. The looks on the faces of the watching crowd told her that this was not a common occurrence, but it was clearly recognized as legitimate. Elder Voss, the head of the Kithrin Council, stepped forward. His ancient features were creased with what Maya had learned to recognize as concern. "The tradition you invoke is old, Tor. It has not been used in over 3 centuries. Are you certain you wish to claim this right?" Tor nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "The arrow was loosed with intent and skill. I caught it in fair witness before all assembled. The law is clear, Elder Voss. The archer is bound to serve until the debt is repaid." Maya found her voice at last. "What debt? I don't understand what's happening here." Tor turned his attention to her, and Maya felt the weight of his gaze. "By Kithrin law, when a skilled archer looses an arrow with intent to prove their worth, and that arrow is caught in flight by another, the archer becomes bound to the catcher. It is an ancient tradition that recognizes the superior skill of the one who can intercept a projectile in flight." "But that's impossible," Maya protested. "No one can catch an arrow moving that fast. It's physically impossible." "Not for a guardian," Elder Voss said quietly. "Tor is one of the last of the guardian class. They are enhanced beings created in the early days of our empire to serve as protectors and champions. Their reflexes and speed are far beyond what normal Kithrins possess." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard whispers of the guardians during her time here, but had assumed they were legends. The idea that they were real, and that she had somehow attracted the attention of one, was terrifying. "What does this binding mean exactly?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Tor stepped closer, and Maya noticed that he moved with a predatory grace that reminded her of the great cats from Earth. "It means that you are under my protection and guidance until such time as you have repaid the debt of skill. In ancient times, this would have meant training under the Guardian until you reached a level of ability that satisfied them. And in modern times," Meyer asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "In modern times?" Elder Voss said with what sounded like regret. "The tradition calls for marriage. The archer becomes the spouse of the one who caught their arrow, and the debt is considered repaid through the union of their houses." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "Marriage, but I'm human. I'm not even part of your society." "The law makes no distinction regarding species," Tor said. "An arrow loosed with intent is an arrow loosed with intent regardless of who draws the bow. You sought to prove your worth through our trial, and in doing so you became subject to our laws." The implications crashed over Maya like a wave. Her mission to establish diplomatic relations with the Kithrins had just become infinitely more complicated. If she was bound to this guardian by their laws, it could affect the entire human presence in Kithrin space. "Surely there must be some alternative," she said desperately. "Some way to resolve this without marriage." Elder Voss consulted with several other council members in Rapid Kithrin before turning back to her. "The law is ancient, but it is still valid. However, given the unprecedented nature of the situation, we are willing to grant a period of consideration. You have 1 lunar cycle to decide whether you will accept the binding or challenge it." "Challenge it how?" Meyer asked. "Through combat," Tor said simply. "If you can best me in single combat, the binding is broken. If you cannot, then the marriage must proceed." Maya looked around the amphitheater at the hundreds of watching faces. This was not how she had imagined her morning would go. She had expected to either pass or fail the archery trial and face the consequences of that result. Instead, she found herself bound by an ancient law to a being she had never met and faced with a choice between marriage and fighting someone who could catch arrows out of the air. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course," Elder Voss replied. "You will be given quarters appropriate to your new status while you consider your options. Guardian Tor will ensure your safety and comfort during this time." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya found herself alone with Tor. Up close, she could see the subtle differences that marked him as a guardian. His musculature was more defined, his skin had a faint luminescence, and his eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. "I know this is not what you expected," he said quietly, "but the law is the law. I could not let your arrow strike the target." "Why not?" Meyer asked. "Why did you interfere?" Tor was quiet for a long moment. "Because I have been watching you train for weeks. I have seen your dedication, your skill, your refusal to give up despite the odds against you. When I saw you loose that arrow, I knew it would find its mark, and I knew that if you succeeded, you would leave this world and return to your people. So you caught my arrow to trap me here. I caught your arrow because I could not bear to see you go." Tor said with an honesty that surprised her, "The binding is real and must be honored. But I hope in time you will understand that it need not be a prison." Maya stared at him, trying to process everything that had happened. Her carefully planned life had just been turned upside down by a being she barely understood operating under laws she had never learned. But as she looked into Tor's eyes, she saw something there that gave her pause. Not the cold calculation of a captor, but something warmer and more complex. "Show me these quarters," she said finally. "I have a lot of thinking to do." As they walked through the crystal corridors of the Kithrin city, Maya caught glimpses of the life she had been studying from the outside. The Kithrins moved with purpose and grace, their technology seamlessly integrated into their environment. But now she was seeing it from a different perspective, no longer as a visitor, but as someone who might have to make this place her home. The quarters Tor led her to were spacious and elegantly appointed with furniture that adapted to her human proportions. Large windows provided a view of the city and the landscape beyond, reminding her that she was far from Earth and everything familiar. "I will leave you to rest," Tor said as they reached her door, "but know that I am available if you have questions or need anything." "I do have one question," Maya said. "How many arrows have you caught in your lifetime?" Tor smiled for the first time since she had met him. "Including yours, 1. Maya watched him walk away and felt her world shift again. The guardian who had just bound her to an ancient law had never invoked it before. She was not just any archer whose arrow he had caught. She was the first. As she closed the door behind her, Maya realized that her mission to establish relations with the Kithrins had succeeded in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer just a human diplomat studying alien customs. She was about to become part of those customs, whether she wanted to or not. The view from her window showed the training ground where her arrow had been caught. The target she had been aiming for still stood unmarked, a reminder of the shot that had changed her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and impossible decisions, but tonight she had to come to terms with the fact that her carefully planned future had just become something entirely different. Maya sat on the adaptive furniture and tried to process everything that had happened. The mission brief had prepared her for many possible outcomes, but marriage to an alien guardian had not been among them. She thought about her family back on Earth and wondered how she would explain this to them. She thought about her career and the years of training that had led to this moment. But most of all, she thought about Tor and the way he had looked at her when he admitted he could not bear to see her go. There had been something in his eyes that transcended species and culture, something that made her wonder if perhaps this unexpected turn of events might not be the disaster she had first imagined. The Kithran city hummed around her as night fell, and Maya knew that tomorrow would bring the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Whether that chapter would be written in conflict or cooperation remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. Her arrow had found its mark after all, just not the one she had been aiming for. As sleep finally claimed her, Maya dreamed of arrows flying through alien skies and hands that moved fast enough to catch them. In her dreams, the arrows never missed their targets, and the hands that caught them were gentle despite their impossible speed. When she woke, she would have to decide whether to fight or to trust. But for now, she simply let herself rest in the knowledge that her life had become something far more complicated, and perhaps far more meaningful than she had ever imagined. The next morning brought new challenges as Maya tried to understand the full implications of her binding to Tor. Elder Voss had arranged for her to meet with Kithran legal experts who could explain the ancient laws that now governed her situation. The meeting took place in a chamber lined with crystalline formations that recorded and preserved the legal traditions of the Kithran people. The legal experts were a group of elderly Kithrans whose knowledge of their laws was encyclopedic. They explained that the tradition of binding archers to those who caught their arrows dated back to the earliest days of Kithran civilization, when such skills were essential for survival. The law had evolved over time, but its core remained unchanged. Superior skill created obligation. The one who catches the arrow demonstrates mastery over the one who loosed it, explained Elder Kine, the eldest of the legal experts. In ancient times, this mastery was expressed through training and mentorship. The archer would study under the catcher until they reached an acceptable level of skill. But now it means marriage? Maya said. Yes, Elder Kine confirmed. As our society evolved, the binding became more personal. Marriage represents the ultimate union of skills and purposes. The archer and the catcher become partners in all things. Maya felt a headache building, and there's no way to break this binding other than combat. The law allows for 3 possibilities, Elder Kine said, consulting ancient texts that glowed with soft light. First, acceptance of the binding through marriage. Second, dissolution through combat, where the archer must best the catcher. Third, dissolution through mutual agreement, where both parties renounce. The binding, mutual agreement, Meyer asked hopefully. Yes, but it requires the consent of both parties. The catcher must willingly release the archer from the binding. Maya's hopes rose. If she could convince Tor to release her from the binding, she could return to her mission without having to fight him or marry him. It seemed like the perfect solution. However, Elder Kine continued, such releases are extremely rare. The catcher must believe that the archer has achieved sufficient skill or understanding to warrant freedom. This usually requires extensive training and demonstration of worthiness. Maya's hopes deflated. It seemed that no matter which option she chose, she would be spending considerable time with Tor. The question was whether that time would be spent as his student, his opponent, or his wife. After the legal consultation, Maya was escorted to a private garden where Tor waited for her. The garden was a masterpiece of Kithran biotechnology, where plants and crystal formations grew together in harmonious patterns. The air was filled with the scent of alien flowers and the sound of water flowing over living stone. "I trust the legal experts were informative," Tor said as she approached. "Very," Maya replied. "They explained my options. All of them seem to involve you." Tor nodded. "That is the nature of the binding. We are connected now, whether we choose to be or not." "You could choose to release me," Maya said. "The law allows for mutual agreement." "It does," Tor agreed. "But such a release requires that I believe you have achieved sufficient understanding. You arrived here as a diplomat seeking to prove your worth to my people. That goal has not changed." Maya studied his face, trying to read his intentions. "So you're saying I would have to prove myself to you personally?" "In a manner of speaking, yes. The binding creates a relationship between us. For that relationship to end naturally, both parties must benefit from it." "And what would you benefit from teaching me?" Maya asked. Tor was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his words carefully. "I have been a guardian for over 2 centuries. I have served my people faithfully and without question. But I have always served alone. The binding offers something I have never experienced." "Partnership. You want a partner, not a wife," Maya said, understanding beginning to dawn. "I want someone who can stand beside me as an equal," Tor replied. "Someone who shares my dedication to excellence and my commitment to protecting others. Your training has shown me that you possess those qualities." Maya felt a shift in her understanding of the situation. This was not about an ancient law trapping her in an unwanted marriage. This was about a lonely guardian who had found someone he thought could be his equal and had acted to keep her from leaving. "So if I trained with you and proved that I could be that partner, you would consider releasing me from the binding?" "I would consider it," Tor said. "But I make no promises. The training of a guardian is not something undertaken lightly. It requires dedication that goes beyond normal limits." Maya thought about her options. She could challenge Tor to combat, but given that he could catch arrows in flight, she doubted she would win. She could insist on the marriage, but that would create diplomatic complications that could affect human Kithran relations for generations. Or she could train with him and see where it led. "What would this training involve?" she asked. "Everything," Tor replied. "Physical conditioning, mental discipline, tactical awareness, energy manipulation. A guardian must be prepared for any situation." "Energy manipulation." "We are enhanced beings, Maya. We possess capabilities that normal Kithrans do not. Part of your training would involve learning to access similar abilities." Maya stared at him. "You're saying you could enhance me, make me like you." "Not exactly like me," Tor said. "But you could learn to access abilities that humans normally do not possess. Your species has potential that has not been fully explored." The implications were staggering. Maya had come here as a diplomat, but now she was being offered the chance to become something more than human. It was an opportunity that no human had ever been given and might never be given again. "There's something else," Tor said. "Your people are not the only ones who have come to Kithran space seeking alliance. There are others who would see your species as a threat to be eliminated rather than a potential partner. A trained guardian could help protect human interests in ways that a diplomat cannot." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Her personal situation had implications that went far beyond her own life. If she could become a guardian, she could serve as a bridge between humanity and the Kithrans in ways that had never been possible before. "How long would this training take?" she asked. "For a normal student, several years. For someone with your existing skills, perhaps half that time. But there are no guarantees. Guardian training has a high failure rate. And if I fail, Then you would return to your people with knowledge and abilities that could still serve them well. The binding would be dissolved through your honest effort. Maya looked around the garden at the impossible beauty of the alien world that might become her home. She thought about her mission and the importance of establishing good relations with the Keithrans. She thought about her own desires and the life she had planned for herself. But most of all, she thought about the opportunity before her, the chance to become something more than she had ever imagined, the chance to gain abilities that could help her people in ways that traditional diplomacy never could. "I have conditions," she said finally. "Name them." "First, I want regular communication with my people. They need to know what's happening and why." "Agreed." "Second, I want assurance that if I complete the training successfully, I will have a real choice about whether to stay or go." "You will have that choice," Tor promised. "But you should know that completing Guardian training will change you. You may find that the person you become has different desires than the person you are now." Maya nodded. She had expected as much. "Third, I want to understand what it means to be bound to you. What are the implications if I choose to stay?" Tor's expression grew serious. "If you choose to stay after completing your training, we would be partners in all things, not just in combat or duty but in life. Guardians traditionally mate for life, and their bonds are deeper than normal relationships." "Mate for life," Maya repeated. "That's different from marriage." "Much different. It is a melding of purposes and abilities that creates something greater than either individual could achieve alone." Maya felt her heart racing. This was far more than she had bargained for when she had drawn her bow that morning. But it was also an opportunity that might never come again. "I need one more night to think about it," she said. "Of course," Tor replied. "But Maya, you should know that whatever you decide, I will respect your choice. The binding compels certain actions, but it does not compel affection or loyalty. Those must be freely given." As Maya walked back to her quarters, she found herself seeing the Keithran city with new eyes. If she accepted Tor's offer to train her, this place might become her home in ways she had never imagined. She would be taking on responsibilities that went far beyond her original mission. That night she video called her mission commander on Earth. The time delay made conversation difficult, but she managed to explain the situation and her options. The commander was stunned by the developments, but agreed that the opportunity to have a human trained as a guardian could be invaluable for future relations. "The decision is yours, Maya," he said, "but know that whatever you choose, you have the full support of the mission." After the call ended, Maya sat in her quarters, looking out at the alien stars. Tomorrow, she would give Tor her answer and begin a new chapter of her life. She thought about the arrow she had loosed and how it had changed everything. Sometimes the most important shots were the ones that never reached their intended targets. As she prepared for bed, Maya made her decision. She would accept Tor's offer to train her as a guardian. It was a risk, but it was also an opportunity to become something more than she had ever imagined. And perhaps in time she would understand what Tor had meant when he said he could not bear to see her go. The morning of her decision dawned clear and bright. Maya dressed in her diplomatic attire one last time, knowing that after today she would be wearing different clothes and living a different life. She met Tor in the garden where they had spoken the day before. "I accept your offer," she said without preamble. "I will train with you as a guardian." Tor smiled, and for a moment his austere features softened. "I am pleased. The training will be difficult, but I believe you have the strength to succeed." "When do we start?" Maya asked. "Now," Tor replied. "Guardian training begins with understanding what you are capable of. Are you ready?" Maya nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her life as a diplomat was ending, and her life as something else entirely was beginning. She had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but she was ready to face them. As they walked deeper into the garden, Tor began to explain the basics of guardian training. Maya listened carefully, knowing that her future depended on understanding every word. The arrow she had loosed had indeed found its mark, but the target had been something she had never expected to aim for. The first phase of Maya's guardian training began immediately. Tor led her to a secluded area of the Kithran city where the guardian training facilities were located. The buildings were different from the rest of the city's architecture, older and more austere, with thick walls that seemed to absorb sound and light. These facilities have been used to train guardians for over 1,000 years, Tor explained as they walked through corridors lined with ancient symbols. Every guardian in our history has walked these halls. Maya noticed that they encountered no other Kithrans in the training area. When she asked about this, Tor explained that guardian training was conducted in isolation to prevent distractions and maintain focus. How many other guardians are there? Maya asked. Currently, 3, including myself. We are a dying breed. The skills we possess are no longer considered essential in our advanced society. Then why maintain the training at all? Tor stopped walking and turned to face her. Because there are still threats in the galaxy that require our particular abilities, and because the traditions of our people demand that we preserve what our ancestors created. They entered a vast chamber that seemed to extend far beyond what the building's exterior suggested. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with soft light, and the floor was made of a material that felt alive beneath Maya's feet. This is the Chamber of Awakening, Tor said. Here we will begin unlocking the potential that lies dormant in your human genetics. Maya felt a chill of anticipation. What kind of potential? All sentient species possess latent abilities that evolution has suppressed in favor of other traits. In humans, these abilities are particularly strong but deeply buried. Guardian training teaches you to access them. Tor led her to the center of the chamber, where a circular platform rose from the floor. The platform was inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and change as Maya watched them. Step onto the platform, Tor instructed. The first test will measure your current abilities and identify areas for development. Maya hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. The moment her feet touched the platform, the symbols began to glow brighter, and she felt a tingling sensation throughout her body. Relax, Tor said. Let the platform read your biological and neural patterns. This will not hurt, but you may feel strange sensations. The tingling intensified, and Maya felt as though every cell in her body was being examined. Lights played across her vision, and she heard sounds that seemed to come from inside her own head. The sensation was not painful, but it was unlike anything she had ever experienced. After several minutes, the lights faded and the platform returned to its normal state. Maya stepped off feeling slightly dizzy, but otherwise unchanged. Interesting, Tor said, studying readings that appeared on a crystalline display. Your baseline abilities are already higher than most humans. The diplomatic training you received must have included some forms of mental conditioning. We did receive training in concentration and stress management, Maya confirmed, but nothing like what you're describing. Nevertheless, it has prepared you well. Your neural pathways show unusual flexibility, and your physical conditioning is excellent. We can begin advanced training immediately. Over the following days, Maya learned what guardian training truly entailed. The physical conditioning was unlike anything she had experienced. Tor pushed her to limb. She had not known existed, testing her strength, speed, and endurance in ways that seemed impossible. Your human physiology is different from ours, Tor explained during one particularly grueling session. But it has advantages. Humans are adaptable in ways that Kithrans are not. With proper training, you can exceed what we consider normal limits. The mental training was even more challenging. Tor taught her meditation techniques that allowed her to access deeper levels of consciousness. She learned to control her autonomic nervous system, slowing her heart rate and breathing to almost nothing. She practiced focusing her awareness until she could sense the movement of air molecules around her. Awareness is the foundation of all guardian abilities, Tor explained. If you cannot perceive what is happening around you, you cannot respond appropriately. Maya found herself changing in ways that went beyond the physical. Her senses became sharper and her reflexes faster. She could hear conversations from hundreds of meters away and see details that should have been invisible. The alien world around her became more vivid and alive as her perception expanded. But perhaps the most significant change was in her relationship with Tor. The guardian who had seemed so alien and intimidating when he caught her arrow was revealing himself to be a complex individual with his own doubts and vulnerabilities. "I was not always a guardian," he told her during one of their evening discussions. "I was chosen for enhancement when I was young, barely more than a child. I have no memories of life before the training. Do you ever regret it?" Meyer asked. "I cannot regret what I do not remember," Tor replied. "But sometimes I wonder what I might have been if I had been allowed to choose my own path." Maya began to understand that her situation was not unique. Tor had also been bound by circumstances beyond his control, transformed into something he had never planned to become. The difference was that she still had a choice about her future, while his had been decided for him centuries ago. As the weeks passed, Maya's abilities continued to develop. She could now move with a speed that approached Tor's own, though she had not yet mastered the precision that allowed him to catch arrows in flight. Her strength had increased to levels that seemed impossible for her frame, and her endurance was virtually unlimited. "You are progressing faster than any student I have trained," Tor observed during one of their sparring sessions. "Your human adaptability is remarkable." "I had a good teacher," Maya replied, dodging a strike that would have felled a normal person. "No," Tor said seriously. "You have natural talent that goes beyond what teaching can provide. I suspect your species has greater potential than anyone has realized." The breakthrough came during her 8th week of training. Maya was practicing in the Chamber of Awakening when she felt something fundamental shift inside her. The world around her suddenly became crystal clear, and she could sense the energy flows that connected all living things. "What's happening to me?" she asked as waves of new sensation washed over her. "You are awakening," Tor said with what sounded like pride. "You are beginning to access your true potential." Maya looked at her hands and saw that they were glowing with a soft blue light. She could feel energy flowing through her body in patterns that seemed both alien and familiar. "This is what guardians can do," she breathed. "This is what you can do," Tor corrected. "The abilities were